Welcome to the conclusion episode of the Unnatural Selection podcast. Today we're going to reflect on each of our episodes. So let's get into it. My name is Abby.
I'm Ethan.
I'm Alyssa.
I'm Julia.
I'm Jason.
For this roundtable, we're going to ask a couple of questions and reflect on the episodes that we've recorded so far.
Starting off with our first question, what was your guys' main bioethical takeaway from your interview? For me, I think the biggest takeaway was that we just need more knowledge on the risks, concerns, and side effects with using CRISPR in the creation of designer babies. There's just way too much up in the air to be playing around with people's lives in this way.
I totally agree. I think my biggest takeaway was the bioethical principle of justice. I think that this new technology is so important and it helps a lot of people, but it can also be taken way out of hand. And it's important to understand the impacts of equity and access.
I agree. I feel like there should be discourse from multiple different communities to form a protective legislative foundation behind gene editing.
I think my biggest takeaway also has to do with justice. I think for my topic of disability, I think I learned that it's really not ethical for able-bodied people to be making these decisions and laws. We really need to include the disability community in these decisions and let them be the leaders of this conversation.
Yeah, my interview really went into the mindset that you have to go into when you create these kind of things. Like, are you going in with the idea of bettering society in a visual or physical way, or are you bettering them by eliminating diseases and targeting things that affect all humans?
And so, how did everyone's view on artificial selection and gene editing change after your interview? I think for me, my view didn't necessarily change, but it definitely deepened and I learned more.
I feel like for me, it went from something very game-changing in a sense, where this could be the solution to a lot of our problems, and then it turned to sort of something that, even if it were accessible to everybody, wouldn't change the social situations that we already have.
I think my view did change. Before, I thought that maybe in some cases with those things like intelligence or able-bodiedness could be good if it was for a person's benefit. But now I see it more as a negative thing that would just result in taking away diversity, pretty much.
My view definitely changed. Before my interview, I was doing a bunch of research and I like the idea of designer babies, and on paper it looks really good. But then the more that you research and the more that you look into it, you're it's a pretty muddy kind of situation, at least for now.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that as well. I would say that for me, my view didn't change all that much, but just became more solidified.
What is your biggest ethical concern regarding artificial selection and designer babies? I feel like for me, as stated before, it's a slippery slope. I mean, you can perpetuate already existing problems in society, especially when accessibility is a huge issue. If it remains only the top 1% to 2% can afford this treatment, it can lead to bigger problems.
I definitely agree with Jason. And I also think my biggest concern is just modern eugenics. I think when we get to a point of classifying good and bad genes, it just never goes in a positive direction. And I don't think something that no one has control over should be something they're discriminated for.
Yeah, I agree. My interview mainly went over what does it mean for class discrepancies? Is this going to create social stratification within creating a super elite class above everyone else who has genetic advantages?
My biggest ethical concern is the generational health risks related to using this technology.
I think that my biggest ethical concern really aligns with my takeaway as well. I think justice is the biggest thing, and that accessibility to this technology. I liked what Abby said about how when we start determining what good and bad genes are and what good and bad embryos are, specifically in my episode, that's when it becomes a slippery slope and it can be concerning, and I just worry about where that could go in the future. All right, I think that sums up our questions, and we want to say thank you for listening. We hope that you learned something new or it got you thinking. And so this is the end of the Unnatural Selection.